Masechet Kiddushin Daf Ayin Tet Mishnah Misha natan reshut lishlocho lekadesh et bito v'alachu v'kiddusha im shelo kadmu kiddushav kiddushin im shel shilocho kadmu kiddushav kiddushin v'meno yadua shenehem notnim get v'im rasu echad noten get ve'echad kones. A father appoints a messenger to go and receive Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter. He tells the messenger, go find someone who you think is good and ask him if he would be willing to marry this girl, and then he'll give you Kiddushin, and then you are appointed. And so once the money gets into the hands of that messenger, that's it. The Nisu'in works. In the meantime, the father went himself and accepted Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter, which a father has a right to. We're talking about a minor daughter, and the question is, which one came first? She's not married to both, but only one. So it depends. If the father he sent the messenger first, but then while the messenger was out, he was on the journey, and the father went himself and accepted Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter from Mr. B, let's say, call him, then that Kiddushin from Mr. B is the valid Kiddushin, and whatever the Shaliach does afterwards is invalid. On the other hand, if the messenger received Kiddushin from Mr. A, we'll call him, first, then she is mikudeshet to Mr. A, and what the father did afterwards is invalid, because there's no Kiddushin, the second Kiddushin does not apply after the first one already does. Here's the problem. What if you don't know? They were in different places, and he's like, I don't know, I did it around the middle of the day. The other guy says, well, I get it around the middle of the day. We don't know exactly which one was first. Well, then both of them have to give a get, because it could be either one, and she won't be able to marry anybody else until she receives a get from both of them. Or, if they both agree, then one of the men can give her a get, and she can marry the other one. Right? One of them says, it's all right, you take her, so he will give her a get. And so now, either way, it doesn't matter. If the one who gives the get was the one who she got engaged to first, so now she was engaged to that guy, but she got a get from that guy, so now she's free to marry the other. And if the guy who gives her the get was not the one who gave it to her first, then the get that he gave her is just a piece of paper, is not really necessary, and in fact she is already engaged to the other guy, and then she goes ahead and continues and marries the other guy, which is also totally fine. So that's case number one. Now we have another similar case, but this time, instead of the father doing it, she accepts it for herself. This would be if she's an adult. וכן האישה שנתנה רשות לשלוחה לקדשה, והלכה וקידשה את עצמה, אם שלה קדמו קידושי קידושין, ואם ששלוחה קדמו קידושיו קידושין, ואם אינן יודעים שניהם נותנים לה גט, ואם רצו אחד נותן לה גט ואחד כונס. A woman goes and appoints a messenger to receive kiddushin for her, right? Go find some nice guy and receive kiddushin. In the meantime, she finds some handsome guy and she says, all right, I'll take kiddushin from you, and she accepts it. So which one came first? If she received the Kiddushin first, then that guy is her husband. But if the messenger went and received Kiddushin on behalf of her first, before she did, then that guy that the messenger received from is the real husband. And if they don't know which one was first, then she must receive a get from both of them before she can marry a third party. However, if they all agree, then one of them could give a get, and the other one will continue and marry her, right? Because either way, she'll be fine. Now, we wonder, usricha, why do we need both of these cases? It's basically the same principle. Why do you have to tell me about the father and about her herself? If we said regarding the first case of the father himself, then we would say maybe only there does his own act override that of the messenger, because mishum de gabrakim lebiochasin, men are very careful and expert regarding lineage, and so in that case, even though the father sent a messenger, if he sees some guy come along who has really good lineage, he's going to say, you know what, forget that messenger. He's not going to find someone with as good lineage as this guy here, and so as long as he's first, he will receive the Kiddushin for his daughter, and have in mind for sure that he does not want the messengers to be effective. He wants his own to override that of the messenger who didn't act yet. But in the case of women herself, women are not as much experts regarding lineage. And so we might say that her own Kiddushin is not valid. No, she sent the messenger and she really wants the messenger to go and find someone, whoever the messenger thinks, to accept Kiddushin on her behalf. She happens to see someone who offers it to her, so, out of this politeness, she's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll marry you, but she doesn't really mean it. Even though the guy in front of her might be have better lineage, she's not such an expert to say, is it better to have a Kohen who's a this, or a Levi who's higher status, so she's not so careful. So in her mind, she's going to say, whatever the messenger does, that's really what I want to happen. And so even if she accepts Kiddushin first, she doesn't have in mind to actually have this Kiddushin that she takes effective. That's what we might think. That's why the Mishnah has to say, even in the case of her herself, if she accepts Kiddushin, we assume she means it, and her Kiddushin is valid and not the messenger. And if we only had the second case regarding her receiving it for herself, there we would say that when she receives it herself, a woman is very particular about who she's going to marry. She's the one that's going to have to live with this guy forever, not the father. And so she's going to be very careful and say, you know what, this guy I really do want to marry. And so she'll have in mind that, okay, forget the messenger. As long as she's first, so she's going to make sure that she has in mind this will be an effective marriage, and forget about the messenger. So it'll definitely work there. But I might have thought about that the father, he doesn't care that much, to the same extent anyway, as the woman herself, as the daughter herself would. And so for the father, he sent the messenger. He really wants the messenger to do the job. Someone comes along, and so he says, out of politeness, you know what? Yeah, you can marry. I'll accept this from you. But he doesn't really mean it, because he's not so particular about it, and so he doesn't really have in mind that this one should be okay. So I might have thought that, in fact, in the case of the father, it's only what the messenger does, and even if he's first, it would not be valid. Sidicha, that's why I need the first case to teach me that also, in the first case, the father does care, and if he's accepting it from this particular guy, he means it, and the messenger is cancelled if he was first, and also the same thing with the daughter. Itmar. Now, before those two cases were about a messenger versus the agent himself. But now we have the father versus the woman herself. The father receives Kiddushin for his daughter when he's away. And meanwhile, she is in town and she receives a Kiddushin for herself. And she's an adult. So now and behold, she is an adult, meaning she becomes an adult sometime in between. Right now, as when the case comes to us, to the court, she's an adult. So now what do we say? When did she become an adult? We're not sure if when the father received the Kiddushin, she was a minor, and then in which case that would be good, or already an adult. Or when she received it for herself, was she a minor, in which case hers would not be good, or was she an adult? So we have a machloket. Rav Amar Harehi Boged Lefanenu. Rav says, right now we see her and she is a Bogeret. And therefore we can assume that she was a Bogeret before. Kind of like a backwards chazakah. We know for sure this is the state now, so we can assume that this was the state before until the last time anybody checked. Shmuel Amar Chayshina Nekedushe Shenehem. Shmuel says, no, even though she's a Bogeret right now, she's an adult and can receive it for herself, but we don't know what she was beforehand. She might have been this, she might have been a minor, in which case the father's Kiddushin is the valid one, or she might have been an adult, in which the daughter's Kiddushin is the valid one. Since we don't know, we have to account for both of them, and she would need a get from both. Now we ask to clarify this machloket. Emat, when exactly did this happen? If it happened within 12 months, this is talking about a girl is a kitana before 12 years old. Between 12 and 12 and a half, she is a na'ara. From 12 and a half on, she's a bogeret. Actually, that's just the standard. It actually depends on simanim, seeing 2 hairs. If she would see 2 hairs even before 6 months, she would also be a bogeret. So whichever comes first. So now, if we're talking about before the 6 months is up, that means she's still a na'ara, in which case the father has the right to do it. So would Rav say, oh, she's a bogeret now? Who cares if she's a bogeret now? Obviously, she was a na'ara beforehand, and so it should be only the father. And we shouldn't assume that the chazakah backwards if if the event happened before 6 months was finished. So that can't be the case. Hashtahu de bagra. Now she became an adult in the meantime, after the father accepted it. Yeah, she's an adult now that it comes to the court, but she was an nada before. So that can't be it. Ela achar shisha, rather, did the whole thing happen, the acceptance of Kiddushin happen after the 6 months, after she was 12 and a half? Well, in that, would Shemuel have a concern that for both of the Kiddushin, this stuff, she's definitely an adult, so only hers should matter and not the father's. Shemuel agrees that the difference between Na'ara and a Bogeret is 12 months, so after 12 months, even if there's no biological signs, doesn't matter. She is already a bogeret for sure, and therefore her kiddushin should be good, and not the father's. There's no safek about it. So which case is it? Oh, we're talking about a case where the Kiddushin, these both Kiddushins happened on the exact day that she completed the 6 months. Rav says, look, at the end of the day we see her, and we see that she is a bogeret. Since she's a bogeret now, we can assume that she was a bogeret in the morning. So that's the chazakah that we're extending backwards, and therefore her Kiddushin is good, and not the father's. Shmuel says not necessarily. Look, in the morning the 6 months was not up, and then she got signs. She might have got grown biological signs in between, right, during the middle of the day, after the Kiddushin was received. So the fact that we see signs now at the end of the day that she is a bogeret doesn't mean necessarily that she had them in the morning. We don't know if the signs came first or the Kiddushin came first, and therefore she'll need to get from both. All right, good. So then now we established the case. It's only talking about a small window. This whole machloket is about what happened on that very same day. Ushmuel, my shana mikveh. Now, regarding Shemuel, we want to know why is he differ from the Mishnah regarding a mikveh? Here's the case. Ditnan. Mikveh shenimdad v'nimsa haser. Kol tarosh shana asu al gabav l'mafreya, ben b'shut ha'echid ben b'shut ha'rabim, temeot. You have a mikveh. Now, at some point, someone built the mikveh, and it had 40 se'ah, and it was good, and they're using it all along, and they're dipping things in it. One day, someone comes along and actually measures it and checks and finds out that it's missing. It has less than 40 se'ah. So what do you do with all the things? So let's say someone checked it 10 days ago, and now we checked it and it was good. Today it's not good. What about all the things that we dipped in it in the past 10 days? So the Mishnah teaches all those things that were dipped in it retroactively are tameh, whether it's in private domain or public domain. For some laws, we say that if something's in public domain and the safek, we assume it's tahor. In the private domain, we assume it's tameh. But here, it doesn't matter where it is, we say it's tameh. So retroactively, we take the current state. The current state is it's not a good mikveh, and we assume we do a backwards chazakah. According to Rav, this would make sense. Just like we see she's a bogeret now, we assume she was a bogeret before. Here too, it's a non-kosher mikveh now. We can assume it was non-kosher before, so it makes sense for Rav. But according to Shemuel, why the Mishnah is sure that we do a backwards chazakah here? Why don't we do the same for the bogeret? And the answer is shane hatam. Dika lememad hamed tameh al chizkato ve'emad lo tabal. No, in the case of a mikveh, we actually have a chazakah regarding the item. I had some cup, and it was tameh, so it has a chazakah that it was tameh, and now I dipped it in this thing, but now I don't know what this the mikveh was it kosher or not? So since there was a chazakah in the cup already that it was tameh, so I'm going to assume the chazakah continues, and it was not, and assume it was not properly immersed, so there's a chazakah against it, chazakah of tum'ah. We ask, wait a second, there's a chazakah also for the mikveh. We checked the mikveh 10 days ago. It was a kosher mikveh. So why don't we assume it's a chazakah until we find that it's no good. So there's a chazakah of the cup, that's tameh. There's a chazakah of the mikveh, that's good. So we answer, yeah, but the mikveh, right now, we see it and it's no good. So how strong could that chazakah be that it was kosher 10 days ago if right now we know for sure it was not? It stopped at some point in between. So at this point, Shemuel has answered the question. There is a difference between the mikveh case where there's a chezkat of tum'ah, and so that's different from the bogeret case. But now we ask, hold on, actually the bogeret is the same as the mikveh case because the bogeret is here now and she is kosher. She's an adult, so we can assume that she was an adult backwards, right? No, maybe she just became an adult now and she wasn't an adult from the beginning of the day. No, hatam nameh hashtahu dechaser. Well, if so, you could say the same thing regarding the mikveh, that the mikveh just now, just like you think that she just became a bogeret, maybe the mikveh just became no good, and therefore we should assume that the mikveh was good all along. So why don't you assume that? Hatam tarater l're'uta hachada hacha chada l're'uta. Here's the final answer. In the case of mikveh, there's two reasons to doubt that the mikveh is good. Number one, that you have each item that you dipped in it. This vessel has a chazakah that it was tameh from before. And so, what did we have enough to change the chazakah? And second, that right now it is no good. It's missing. So that's, this one is going forwards, that the kli was tameh. And now this one, now we know the mikveh is no good. So how far back? So since it's going from two directions, there's two flaws. So then we say, you know what? Anything that you dipped in the mikveh retroactively, we have to assume is not good. That's why. But in the case of bogeret, there's only one flaw, or rather, there's only one chazakah, the fact that she is a bogeret now, and so she might have been a bogeret beforehand, right? So we're going one way. But there's no double thing the other way that would add a second chazakah that she was a bogeret. So therefore, while there's only one presumption that she's a bogeret, that's it, it's only one. And so maybe she was a bogeret, but maybe not. Maybe she was a na'ara. So that's why Shemuel has a safek regarding bogeret. She has to be a machmir either way. But with the mikveh, there's a double flaw that the kli was tameh from before, and right now the mikveh is no good, so therefore we can assume for sure that the kli is tameh. Ushmuel, ma'ishena mechavit. Now that we resolved that one, we're going to ask about Shemuel from another case of a barrel. The Tanya, haya bodek et hachavit lafrish aleha tiruma. He has a barrel of wine, and he would use that to separate terumah. Whenever he had some other wine that was tevel, he would say, "Listen, I want a gallon of this barrel to be terumah on behalf of this wine." And then tomorrow he would have to get some more wine that's tevel, and he'd say, "Okay, another gallon from my designated barrel will be terumah for this tevel," and he would keep doing that. Now, he would check this every so often, but then one day he checked this designated barrel and found that it was vinegar. Well, you're not supposed to take terumah from wine to vinegar. So until then, the whole time, every time he checked, it was wine. So far, so good. But at some point, he realizes that it's vinegar. So now what? Retroactively, can he assume that in the time in between, since the last check that it was wine, maybe this is 10 days later, and now it's vinegar, what about all the things in between? All the wine that he designated in the meantime, was it with wine and valid, or was it already vinegar and therefore invalid? And so the answer is for 3 days after the last check. Wine is not going to turn into vinegar instantaneously. So I checked 10 days ago, it was wine. I can assume that for the next 3 days, it was also wine. After that, it's safek, I don't know what it is, it might be vinegar. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now, this is not the question yet. First, we're going to discuss this Mishnah. Urminan Havit Amikveh. So back there, when we discussed this, at that time when we discussed Mikvaot, we wondered about the contradiction between the case of Havit, where we have a Safek, and the case of Mikveh, where we say for sure the Kelim are Tameh. Mashna dahacha vadai, mashna dahacha Safek. How come regarding the Mikveh, we say for sure it's not good, whereas regarding the barrel, we say Safek, we're not sure what it is. In that discussion, we answered, "V'amar Rav Chanina Mesuria man Tana Chavit Rabbi Shimon hi degabe mikveh name sefeka mashveh." So in fact, who is the Tana of that halacha regarding Chavit? It's not the majority. That's only Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon regarding mikveh also says that everything that we dipped in the meantime is sefek, as we see in the following Braita Detanya. Kol tarot shenasu al gabav lemafreh ben b'shut yachid ben b'shut rabim temeot. Rabbi Shimon omer b'shut rabim teorot b'shut yachid tolin. If we have a mikveh that was a kosher mikveh when we checked 10 days ago, but now it's not a kosher mikveh, then all the things that we dipped in it in the meantime, retroactively, whether it's in a private or public domain, are no good. That is Tanakama. That's what we saw before in the Mishnah. However, the Bishimon says it depends. If it's in public, we say tahor. In general, when there's sefek and it's a public domain, so we assume that it's okay. But if it's in a private domain, then we say, we're not sure, sefek. So you see that Rabbi Shimon says, at least in a private domain, there's a sefek regarding the things that happen in between in the mikveh, and so he is the author of that Tanaitic statement regarding mikvaot that said that we're also not sure about what happened in between. Was it vinegar or not? And so the tebel that we separated Terumah for is going to be tolin. We're not sure what it is. So you see that Rabbi Shimon is consistent, and he's the author of that baraita. Aval Rabbanan tebel lemafreya, but Rabbanan, since Rabbanan say regarding mikveh that for sure it's okay. In other words, we take the current state and assume it backwards. Rabbanan, in the case of the barrel, would say it's for sure tebel. Now that we see that it's vinegar, we can assume it was vinegar since the last time we checked. And therefore, all that produce is 100% tevel. And this is the question, according to Rabbanan, against Shemuel. According to Rabbanan, we take the current state and we assume a chazakah backwards. Shemuel, why do you have a sefek regarding the bogeret? Why don't you say she's a bogeret like Rav says? She's a bogeret now and assume the same thing backwards. So Shemuel can answer. Over there you have a chazakah forwards that we have produce that is for sure tebel. I know it's tebel. I just harvested it. And so it has a chazakah that it is tebel until you have something strong that will break the chazakah. So since we don't know what happened to it after, because we don't know if it was vinegar or wine, so we assume that it was not fixed, it remains tebel. And then we ask about that. Wait a second, why do you say that there's a different chazakah that it was wine? We know once upon a time it was wine. We checked it once and say we assume it was wine and it did not become vinegar, and therefore we should say it's okay. No, you can't do that because we see it now and it is in fact vinegar now. So we are going to assume backwards that it was vinegar. So that would be an answer for Shemuel. Now we ask, but that is true for bogeret as well. She's a bogeret now. Why not assume for sure she was a bogeret beforehand also, like you do with the chavit? So we say, hashtahu de bagla. No, maybe she just became a bogeret just now 1 minute ago. Well, then you should say the same thing regarding the barrel. Maybe it just became chametz 1 minute ago. Why is there a safek? And the answer is hatam tarate l're'uta hacha chada l're'uta hu de'ika. In the case of the barrel, there are two flaws that are that are weakening it. Number one, that this produce definitely was tebel, so we assume that it has a chazakah of being tebel. And the second, that the barrel is definitely vinegar now, so now we have a backwards chazakah that it was vinegar at some point beforehand, and so that's why we assume vadai that we don't have a sefek about it. We assume that the tevel is still tevel. There's a double flaw. But regarding the bogeret, there's only one flaw, or one assumption, and that is that she is a bogeret now, so she might have been a bogeret before, but maybe not. We can't be sure. There's no chazakah there's no double chazakah going the other way. And therefore, since there's only one reason to think that she's bogeret from before, that's not enough. So Shemuel says that's why in case of bogeret, we have a safek, and we don't know what she was. We have to assume both. She needs 2 gitin, and that's different from the case of mikveh and the case of the barrel, where we have 2 assumptions that we can rely on to give a vadai pesak halacha. Now we suggest that the machloket between Rav and Shemuel is parallel by a machloket Tanaim. Nema ke Tana'eh. Mi mosi miyad mi. Okay, the law that we're talking about is someone who gives away all his property, but then changes his mind and wants to take it back. Can he do that? Well, it depends. If he's healthy and he gives away all of his property and then he wants to take it back, he cannot. He already gave it away. So that's it. It's a legal transaction. So very generous of you, but that's it. You can't take it back after that. However, if someone is goses and he gives away all of his property, we assume he's giving away all his property because he thinks he's going to die. If he then gets better and he says, listen, I only gave it because I thought I was going to die. I didn't mean to give it away if I was going to live. I need something to live on. So then he has a right to take back the property because he didn't really mean it when he gave it. It was kind of like on an implicit condition. So now the question is, we have a guy here who is, let's say he's healthy right now, and he comes and says, listen, I gave away my property to them when I was goses. But now I'm better, so I want it back. So that would be a rightful claim. But the receivers of the present say, no, you gave it to us when you were healthy, and therefore no backsies. So that's what their claim is. And so they come to the court. So who can remove it from whom? Who has the upper hand? And so is machloket. Hu mosi miyadam belo re'aya, v'hen en mosi miyado belo re'aya, dibre Rabbi Yaakov. So Rabbi Yaakov says that the guy, right, who was who the giver of the gift, he can take it from them without any proof. He could just say, listen, I was goses, so give it to me, right? And they have to give it back to him. And he doesn't have to bring a proof. Whereas they cannot take it from his hands unless they bring a proof that he was healthy. This is like more or less, right? If it's in the giver's hands and they want to come take it from him, they have to bring a proof that in fact he was healthy and that he already promised and gave and transferred it to them, did some kind of transaction that effectuated the gift. So then, if they can prove it, that's fine. Otherwise, it stays in the giver's hands. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov. We're going to say that Shemuel lines up with Rabbi Yaakov, just like Shemuel says, we don't know what her state was. It's just a safek, so you have to be machmir for both. So that's like Rabbi Yaakov here also. We don't know who's right and who's wrong. So since the giver, we know he had it from before, so if he can take it, but if they can prove that's theirs, then they can take it. It's basically safek, and so the receivers have to prove if it was in fact theirs. Otherwise, the giver can come and take it from them. So that we treating it as a safek case. Rabbi Natan omer im barihu alav lavi raya shechimera im shechimera hu alem lavi raya shebari haya. Rabbi Natan says we look at the current state of the giver. If right now he is healthy, then we assume he was healthy beforehand, so he can't take it back unless he brings a proof that he was in fact on his deathbed. And if he can prove on his deathbed, then he can take it back. On the other hand, if right now he's on his deathbed, he's goses, so we would assume that he was goses chazakah backwards, that he was also goses when he gave it, and therefore he can take it back unless the receivers can bring proof that he was healthy. You see here, according to the Binatan, we look at the current state and we assume the chazakah backwards, that the current state is what was there before, unless you prove otherwise. That's the same as Rav. So Nema Rav Tamaked Binatan, that we look at the current state and assume that was the same thing backwards, as a vadai. Ushmel Amda Amaked Yaakov, and Shmuel says this is safek. Amad lach Rav, and so we say not necessarily. We don't want to box in each Amorah to be only like one Tana. So Rav says, Ana damre afilu kedebi Yaakov, I can fit my opinion regarding the Bogeret and fit it with Yaakov in this case. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yaakov hatam deika lememad hamed mamon al chezkato. Avalacha minem hamed guf al chezkato. Regarding this, here is a monetary case. And we have a general rule, you leave the money as is chazakah, meaning wherever it is. And if the money is with the giver, so then let the receivers come and prove otherwise, right? So there is a place. But regarding a person's body, do we say that there is a chazakah? She's a bogeret now, and therefore she was always a bogeret? That's nonsense. Obviously, she was not always a bogeret. That morning, and the day before, and the day before that, she was a na'ara for sure. So there is no chazakah in this case. So that's why it makes sense. I could agree with Rabbi Yaakov that if the money is in one place, we're going to leave it there, and not assume the current state. It really, in other words, doesn't matter if he's currently healthy or currently sick. It doesn't matter what the current stage is, because the money has a state that it was already in. But in the case of a woman where she didn't have any state before, she was definitely a na'ara before, there's no chazakah about her body, so then we should look at the current state and assume that it was so from before the time of the Kiddushin. Ushmuel Amar Ana Damre Afilu K'Rabbi Natan. Ushmuel says, I can agree with Rabbi Natan. Ad kan lo kama Rabbi Natan hatam dekula ama becheskat biriim kaimeh. Man dekama pik nafsheh mechazaka have ale la tuye re'aya. Rabbi Natan I would agree with, because everybody has a chazakah that they are healthy. Most people are healthy, and so you're presumed healthy until we see that you're sick. So therefore, someone who wants to remove himself from the chazakah and say, no, I was sick, so he has to bring a re'ayah. And so therefore, the owner, the giver here, right, who is, let's say he's currently healthy, and Rabbi Yaakov here says that if he's currently healthy, he has to bring a proof that he was sick, because he was healthy beforehand, right? At some point, when since he was born, he was healthy, assuming, and so as chazakah, most people are healthy, and then he's claiming he became sick, and now he's healthy again. This is kind of like what we said before. From both ways, as a chazakah that he was healthy. So then we're going to assume that he was healthy, and he can't take it back unless he proves otherwise. So that's why, in this case, we look at the current situation. He's healthy now. Well, chazakah, he was healthy before too, so that's why we assume that for sure he was healthy unless he proves otherwise. However, but in the case of the woman, is she removing herself from any previous chazakah? There's no chazakah beforehand that she was a bogeret. In fact, she was not a bogeret. We know for she was a na'ara the day before. And so she's not removing herself from anything, and that's why we have to assume it's a safek. We now ask again, Ne'ema Kehane Tana'eh, maybe Rav and Shmuel match up with the following two Tanaitic opinions. Kiddusha v'yabaded v'kiddusha asma ba'ir v'arehi bogeret. This is a baraita that's the same as the case that we were quoted to begin with, that Rav and Shmuel themselves talked about, that someone, her father accepts Kiddushin when he's away, and she accepts Kiddushin for herself when she's in the city. V'arehi bogeret, and behold, we see that she is bogeret now. Well, there are two baraitot that have different endings to this case. Tanachada harehi bogeret lefanenu. One says, here, she is a bogeret now, so we assume she was a bogeret before, so her kiddushin is good. That will be the opinion of Rav. Vetanya idachashin on the kiddushin nehem. Another one that said, well, we have to worry. We don't know what she was before, therefore we have to be machmir that maybe the father's was good, maybe hers was good. She's going to need a get. That exactly is the opinion of Shemuel. My love, had kerav echad Shemuel. So it must be that one baraita is like Rav, the first one, and the second one is like Shemuel. So now they match up. But this is not good. Rav and Shemuel are arguing on something that Tanaim already argued about. So we say, La'idi v'idi kishmuel, kan b'machachashto, kan b'she'en machashto. In fact, both baraitot are according to Shemuel. And they're talking about different cases. The first case is where she herself denies the father's claim. She says, listen, I was a bogeret. When did you do it? What time? Today in the middle of the day? I was a bogeret from the morning. So she denies the father's claim and says only hers is good. That's why, here, she is a bogeret before in front of us, and she says the father's claim is no good. So we follow her. Even Shemuel would agree to that. Whereas the second braita is when she doesn't say anything. She may herself not know, or she's not around, whatever. There's no counter argument. And then we don't know if at the time that the father did the Kiddushin, was she bogeret or not. Therefore we have to have a safek. So Shemuel can account for both of these baraitot. So now that we reconcile the two baraitot in this way, why don't we reconcile the two opinions of the Moraim and say that Rav and Shemuel are in fact not arguing with each other. And Rav is saying that in a case where she comes and claims, I was a bogeret, the father's claim is out, then we say for sure she's a bogeret now, she was a bogeret before. That I was talking about that case. And Shemuel, when says safek, is when she says nothing. But in fact, they're not arguing with each other, right? If you can reconcile two Barahitot, why can't you reconcile Rav and Shemuel? Vetiz Berav says no. Would that make sense? There's an actual story. Rav Yosef bered Rav Menashe Medevil Abado Badai Kevate de Rav. This Rav Yosef, a case came before him, and he ruled in as Rav did, that she's a bogeret now, so for sure her kiddushin is the one that is that takes effect. Vikpid Shemuel, and Shemuel was upset about at Rav Yosef that he followed Rav instead of himself. V'amar kule alma kaile le bekabazuta v'hai midrabanan kaile le bekabad rabba. He says a sarcastic remark. He says, all the rabbis get a certain wisdom is measured out in a certain measurement, a small measurement to everyone. But this, he has more. What do you think? Are you wiser than everybody else? What, you know something that everybody else doesn't know? That all of a sudden you're sure then you're going to follow Rav? Does Rav have more wisdom? Do you have more wisdom than everybody else? Right? Why'd you choose him over my opinion? So he was upset about it. If they agreed with each other, then why was Shemuel upset? Maybe it was a case where she objects and says that she denies the father's claim, and that's why he followed Rav, because it was a case that Rav was talking about. If you reconcile it, then the machloket, and they're not actually arguing, then Shemuel would agree that if she objected, that for sure her kiddushin is the valid one. The fact that he got upset about it means that there is in fact a machloket. So we can do that. We can reconcile the Baraitot, but we can't reconcile Rav and Shemuel. Amar le'mozutra l'Rav Asher hachi amar amemar hilcheta kevate de Shmuel, Rav Asher amar hilcheta kevate de Rav, hilcheta kevate de Rav. And even though Amemar said halacha is like Shmuel, but Rav Asher says halacha is like Rav, and the final conclusion is halacha is like the opinion of Rav. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen v'amen.